Hello everyone, and once again join my father for another movie review. Say hi, Dad.
Hi.
In today's video, it's going to be a double review. This is going to be a special treat. We're going to talk about the original Scarface from 1932 and the 1980s Scarface with Al Pacino. Dad, what do you think of both versions of Scarface?
Well, they're both very different, obviously. They were made at different times. The earlier one, which may seem a little bit calm these days, was pretty radical when it was first shown back in the 30s.
Right.
And they do follow similar plot lines.
Yeah.
One dealing with, at the time, the immigrant Italians, and with the most recent one with the immigrant Cubans.
Right, right. Which, and I think both of them are good in their own ways. I mean, maybe some people debate about they prefer the Pacino version over the 30s version because of being outdated, which I can sort of see that, but I still think the original still has an important place for, like, gangster film, especially that time period when that was, like, the early beginning of, like, the gangster genre, like, rising up, especially how, like, that time Public Enemy and Little Caesar came out. It was, like, the renaissance of gangster films, and the 80s is still does a good, amazing job of, like, the same plot and storyline, but just big change-ups.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, you know, the 80s version was a lot more graphic.
Yeah, that's
in terms
I
of
could
the
agree on
violence.
that.
Yeah.
Well, even they said, like, the original version at the time, that was considered violent, but not in today's standards. But
Right.
I could agree, the 80s version is a lot more violent than the original.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, like, you know, like you said, they changed up, like, you know, the immigrations of, like, in the original was Italians, and in the 80s remake, it was Cubans for that time because of because it opens up with, like, Fidel Castro giving a speech, and that was during the time, like, when the Fidel Castro laws were, like, really getting worse, and people from Cuba were immigrating from Cuba to the U.S. at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, change of scenery. The original was Chicago. The remake was Miami. As I said when we were watching the remake, in some ways, and that was, like, before Miami Vice at the time, it feels like watching a like, Miami Vice type of...
Yeah, sometimes it does.
Yeah, it had that, like, Miami Vice feel to it, despite Miami Vice was not out yet at the time until 1984. This came out in 83, the 80s remake.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think of, like, the performances from the original, like Pacino, and who was the guy who played the original Tony? And
Yeah, the original was played by Paul Muni.
right. What did you think of him compared to, like, Pacino's performance?
Well, I think that they both don't give the most convincing in terms of accents.
Right. Well, you know, I was watching a video from some guy. He said that a lot of people seem to complain about Pacino's, like, accent. Like, that people have said, like if I'm Cuban, he goes, I don't talk like that. Like, this, like, people compare, like, the stereotypes.
Yeah.
Of,
right. You know, his was an exaggerated type of, almost a parody.
Right.
Of a Latino accent.
Right.
And Paul Muni also, you know, Muni was from the stage.
Right.
He was a very respected actor in Hollywood. He could practically do whatever he wanted because they looked at him as like a prestige type of actor.
Right.
And he was a very good actor, but you know, his accent is coming from you know, like similar to Edward G. Robinson. You know,
right.
Edward G. Robinson also played an Italian in House of Strangers.
Right.
And his accent is also more of a burlesque type of an Italian accent.
Right.
But in any event, you know, the both of the performances were very impassioned.
They were.
And I think that you know, they were convincing in their roles.
Oh yeah, I can agree on that one, especially, like, Pacino. I think he did it, despite, like, what they'll say today, like how he wouldn't be playing this part today because he's not Cuban, but still, it was very convincing and very believable with his performance in the remake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, the other I want to touch upon, like you said, for its time back in the 30s, I mean, they don't, because of the Hays Code, they don't show or say it, but the incest was, like, very, that wasn't a common, that was, like, an unusual thing for its time, and...
Right. And you know, he they on the DVD that we have, they showed the the uncut version and then a cut version, where there was a scene where it wasn't overtly stated, but it was a little bit more implied that there was more, that there could have been a relationship between brother and sister.
But the one way I look at both, like Tony's, both of them were hypocrites in their own ways. Like especially with their in the remake, there's not really incest. It's just like he's overprotective and making sure that she does not go in the wrong. Despite that, there's scenes where she's going out dancing, having a good time, and she goes in the bathroom and shoots like one up her nose, and then Tony comes and breaks in and makes sure that she's not going in the wrong direction, and then she falls for his best friend, who was Tony's. Well, that was both in both. Like, when I was watching the original, like despite I have not seen the remake until like when I was rewatching it, like, I'm seeing like all the connections. Like oh yeah, that was in both. It's like if you see both versions, you're gonna see like a connection of noticing like same thing but differences with like the time period of like copying like the original. Yeah. And also, like, the Michelle Pfeiffer's Breathing Into the Spice, she was a nobody around that time and was just starting out. I think she did a good job, too, in the remake.
She did.
Yeah. There's a part that I like in that when, just like when Tony's, like, at the top, he's seeing how, like, even being at the top has its, like, side effects and its pros and cons. Like, he wants to have children with her, but she can't seem to bear a child with her because of the drugs that she does is affecting her her uterus. And but I don't know why if I was thinking too much into it. Is it possible that I was getting the sense that even though she was upset she couldn't have a children, but she was kind of glad that it wasn't like that he was not going to be the father of her children, because she says we're not winners, and she's got a point there because. Like, why would she want to bring a child in this world where the father's a monster?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was a major point. And one of the things that I found interesting about the older movie was that George Raft played his friend.
Right.
And George Raft became a star on his own after this movie. And there's a little thing that he does in the movie. He flips the coin. And catches it. He flips it, catches it. That's one of the habits, and he did pick that up.
Now you're making me think. Was that an inspiration for TwoFace, possibly for the comic book, maybe? Or it could be.
I don't know. Maybe.
I mean, I'm not saying that could be, true, but it makes you think a little bit now. Like, makes me think of TwoFace. But go on.
Yeah, well, George Raft actually had underworld connections.
Really?
He was.
So he really was a gangster, like.
Well, I don't know if he was. I don't know what his criminal history was, but I know he did have connections with people in the underworld.
Right.
And he kind of picked that up from one of the gangsters that used to do that, flip the coin and catch it.
Right.
And that became kind of his signature. People, recognize him or used to parody that, with George Raft.
Really? Mm-hmm. Like, did SNL parody that, or just...
Oh, no. I mean, back in the days, when they did impressions,
okay, gotcha.
Of different actors.
Okay, gotcha. I feel like the remake is sort of like the big classic compared to the original because of its iconic lines, the soundtrack, and... Also, of course, because like in this modern day age, people are very fascinated with the '80s style. Like, because ever since Stranger Things or whatever show or movie kind of made the '80s popular again, and because even as a kid growing up in the 2000s, I knew about I was little. I definitely was not kid friendly for me to watch at that time, and I knew about the famous line "Say hello to my little friend" through parodies. And I remember when I was a teenager, there was that episode of South Park when the medicinal fried chicken. That episode was not only an episode parody of marijuana, it was also parodying Scarface. When you see the connection, because as I was like watching the '80s Scarface, I'm like now I get the like when you watch that episode, now you're seeing the connection of what they were parodying. Like when he says, "Don't blank with me, Tony. Like, don't mess up or ruin like my operation, or don't like." Well, obviously, we know where that direction goes, where Tony does not listen to the guy who, he was supposed to kill somebody, but he didn't want to kill him because of there were children. And it's kind of weird for a guy who was like a monster and a bad guy, but he had a soft side for children. Because he says, "I don't kill children."
Yeah.
Then he shoots that guy Margolis, who recently passed away from Breaking Bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll just leave it in the description and the outline, and may he rest in peace. Because that guy was in a lot of like movies playing gangsters, bad guys, and he plays a Latino here, but in real life he was Jewish. That guy. Yeah. I also read how that when this film was re-released in the 2000s, they wanted Brian De Palma to like change the music soundtrack to rap music, because at that time rap music was popular. But I'm kind of glad he didn't do that. I don't see like rap music being like replaced with this iconic soundtrack that it has. Yeah, because that song pushed it to the. I don't remember who. Do you remember who plays?
No, I don't remember.
Again, sorry if I'm forgetting the guy's name. I'll just leave it in the in its subtitle form. That's like a very popular like '80s song that like people who were like into '80s music. That's like a go-to song for them. And anytime I work out, I listen to that song. Yeah. Any other thoughts you want to like touch upon with both versions of the original and the remake of Scarface?
No, just that they're both interesting movies.
Yeah.
And the earlier one may seem less relevant, but it also has universal themes.
Yeah.
Which are well portrayed. And looking at it as a time capsule of the way things were in the early 30s.
Right. Well, actually, here's what I wanted. Like the both endings, like the way they end, where in the original, the brother and sister team up until she gets shot and she dies, and whereas in the remake, she already like dies after when she was going to try to kill. Well, you can't say you blame her because Tony shot his best friend who married his sister, and I don't. One thing I find interesting that I learned is that people seem to be upset about when I'm talking about the '80s version when Tony dies. It's like, why are you upset when Tony died? The guy was a piece of garbage.
Yeah.
And maybe because the guy was like, I guess, inspiration for people in a weird, strange way, because he started from nothing, from the bottom, worked his way up. But if you're gonna work your way to the top, don't be a drug dealer. That's my advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah, because every time I've watched the ending to Scarface, it's like, it's not that big of a loss when he gets killed by. No, it's not. The guy was a bad person. He was a monster.
Right.
Yeah. You have like no sympathy for the guy, and it's like and the part when he finally like gets shot, like even despite the guy was high on drugs, he doesn't feel the. I think that was the idea. If he was gonna get shot, he didn't want to feel the pain of all those bullets going through his body.
Yeah.
Then when he's like shouting in Spanish and finally gets shot and falls down to the little like pool pond that he had in his mansion. It's like not a loss. Bye bye.
Yeah.
The end. And again, South Park also parodied that, and I remember there was a Robot Chicken episode where they spoofed it with Mario Luigi. You'll never take me alive. Yes. Yeah. To me, I think both good movies, neutral in their own ways, but different time periods, has the same themes and analysis, but just done differently. How they did it is what I'm amazed and impressed with, how they were able to take same concept and change it up for in a good way. That's what makes a good remake. Yeah. As usual, I forgot to mention something that I did not say in this video with my father. Boris Karloff was in the original, was still a nobody around this time period despite his success with Frankenstein the year before. Anytime someone was about to die, there was an X symbol, meaning death. Tammy Lynn was one of the extras in this movie, was on an Unsolved Mystery episode talking about her disappearance, and sadly to this day she has never been found or seen again. Before her disappearance, her family has said that she was acting strange, and we're unsure why that was. Stephen Bauer plays Manny, Tony's sideman, is Cuban in real life. He's the only Cuban actor in this movie. The last thing I want to mention, the original Scarface, they bootlegged alcohol, and at that time in the 1930s, that was during Prohibition when alcohol was illegal. This movie came out in 1932. 1 year later, Prohibition ended in 1933. In the remake for The Change-Up, Tony Montana was a high, powerful drug lord kingpin, drug dealer. I guess that's about everything we've covered.
Yeah, I think so.
Like the video, subscribe, that bell button, and we'll see you next time. Say bye, Dad.
Bye-bye.